talking about all the haunted and paranormal places in Colorado. I have never been to Colorado before, but by researching all of this stuff, I want to go now. So the first place is probably a very obvious one to you guys, and that is the Stanley Hotel. This hotel was best known for inspiring Stephen King's The Shining. I really hope that all of you guys have seen The Shining before. It is such a good movie, definitely one of my favorites, and I know a lot of tourists will go to the Stanley Hotel nowadays just because they want to see the set from the movie. But not only was this hotel a real movie location, it is also haunted in real life. According to longtime staff, there are 4 spirits that regularly roam the hotel's corridors. Their names are Lucy, Paul, Eddie, and Elizabeth. The concert hall is a particular hotspot for the paranormal activity where lights flicker, laughter and footsteps are heard, along with chilly drafts. There's also an area called the Vortex, which is a staircase between the floors in the hotel's main guest house. Is said to have a lot of supernatural energy, so spirits that want to get from floor to floor will use this vortex staircase, and apparently if you're walking up and down it, you can sense the spirit's energy. So one of the very haunted rooms is room 401. What's creepy is that years ago, the entire 4th floor was actually just an attic. It's where all the female employees, the children, and the nannies would sleep. That attic was soon made into a floor where guests could actually stay, and people who go there and stay there to this day will hear children giggling, children running around, and there's also a famous closet in that room that constantly opens and shuts on its own. The next haunted room is room 428. What's so creepy is that it says you get a badge of bravery for staying in any room on the 4th floor because apparently it's that haunted. You'll get bonus points if you stay in room 428. Guests have reported hearing footsteps above them and furniture moving about. But the real haunt in this room is a friendly cowboy who appears at the corner of the bed. I mean, at least he's friendly. That's a good thing. This next picture really spooks me. It's actually a spirit that was caught on camera at the Stanley Hotel. It was taken during one of their tours. So this is what the picture looks like. As you can see, going up or down the stairs, there is that little girl ghost figure. And what's creepy is that this article says there were no young girls in their 11-member tour party. And paranormal researchers actually examined this photo thoroughly and found that there was no manipulation whatsoever. I just really hope that I get to actually go to the Stanley Hotel one day. That's just a dream of mine. Okay, so this next place is the ghost town of St. Elmo. I feel like I can never say Elmo in like a serious way because I just think of Elmo, you know? But no, seriously, this town has some really creepy history. Officially founded in 1880, the once flourishing Colorado town of St. Elmo was an active gold and silver mining spot. This town used to have around 2,000 people who lived there. So it used to be bustling, it used to be happening. Apparently $60 million worth of gold was mined there. So apparently this town was a hub to transport all of their mining goods by train back and forth. But then unfortunately in the early 1920s, the mining industry began to dwindle, so trains stopped going into this town of St. Elmo, resulting in hundreds of people suddenly leaving because the town was all of a sudden so isolated. Eventually, every single person in the town left except for 2 people. These 2 people that stayed there were brother and sister. They were named Tony and Annabelle. It says that they stayed in this abandoned town all the way through the 1950s, even after Postal Service stopped going there, so nobody was going into this town. They were totally isolated and alone. They were there for so long that eventually they had to be taken to mental institutions because they had lost their mind from having no human interaction, from living in such poor conditions. They lost their mind from living in St. Elmo. So creepy. creepy. This next place is called the Gold Camp Tunnels. When the tunnels were built in the 1800s, it says that many workers unfortunately died while they were being built. There was also this rumor that a school bus crashed into the bridge and all the students on the bus passed away. So apparently nowadays, if you're walking through the tunnel, if you're driving through the tunnel, you will hear whispering and crying and footsteps. Some people will actually park their car in the middle of the tunnel and it will get pushed by an unknown force. Others have said to see apparitions of men in cloaks, and it's just a very mysterious location. This next place is called Vampire Grave, and I am so intrigued by this. In Lafayette, there is an old cemetery, and many who came to rest here for eternity never got a headstone. But one person did get a headstone, and that person was Fodor Glava from Transylvania. Local lore says he was a vampire, and the tree that is over his grave grew from the stake that was thrust in his heart to keep him from rising and causing havoc. So people often go there to visit this vampire grave because it's so well known. And local kids often report of seeing a tall, dark figure sitting atop the grave. A bunch of paranormal investigators have also been there multiple times, and every time they take pictures of the grave, they see these huge orbs all around it. Some people even bring garlic with them when they go to see this grave. So that's a bit extreme, but I would love to see this in person. This next place is called Riverdale Road. This is sometimes referred to as the most haunted road in America, but obviously there are so many haunted roads in America. This small stretch of asphalt outside of Denver is the source of many terrifying tales. There used to be a mansion on this road that was torn down, and all that's left of this mansion currently are these creepy, rusty old gates. Now, apparently the man who used to live in that mansion became possessed and burnt down his house with his family inside. So now those gates remaining are called the Gates of Hell. So, yeah, that's terrifying. And I guess because that tragedy happened, the whole road is haunted. It is also said that the road was built on Native American burial grounds, and it has also been the site of many tragic accidents. So when people are driving down this road, their car will break down, they'll drive into the ditch, they'll hear chanting. Sometimes people just disappear entirely when they go down this road. And there is also the ghost of Joggers Hill. Now, Joggers Hill is slightly down Riverdale Road. It's a dirt path at the crest of a hill known as Joggers Hill. The legend states that a jogger suffered a hit and run where the driver raced off in a panic, and now the jogger lurks as a shadowy menace in the area, terrorizing any drivers who stop atop the hill. This next thing is actually a giant horse statue. People call it the Curse of Blucifer because it is a blue horse, and apparently it's evil. The 32-foot sculpture of a seemingly bloodthirsty bronco is the work of an artist named Luis Jimenez. Now what's crazy is he was the artist, and while he was making this giant horse, it actually fell on him and killed him. This statue is 9,000 pounds, so obviously no one could survive that. So naturally, many Denver residents believe the beast to be cursed and have protested its presence at the Denver International Airport. So people didn't want it near planes, obviously, if it had such bad luck associated with it. I mean, an artist being killed by their own work. That's terrible. This next one is about whoa. What happened to my voice? This next one is about La Llorona, which I know I did a whole video about, but there is a specific place in Colorado that she has seen quite a lot, and that area is the San Luis Valley. The legend of La Llorona is a popular Spanish legend about a ghostly woman that walks near rivers weeping and looking for her lost children. Some claim to have heard and seen La Llorona along the Rio Grande River in the San Luis Valley. So if you're ever over there, be careful of La Llorona. Alright, Alright, so let's get right into the creepy legends in Pennsylvania. The first legend is about the Green Man. Now, this is actually a legend that turned out to be true. Residents of South Park area near Pittsburgh during the 1950s often spotted a strange figure walking along Route 351 at night. People said the figure was a man without a face who allegedly emitted this green glow from his body. Now, locals were extremely frightened by this person walking around, and it was strange how he only went out at night. Now, people thought this might have been a ghost or a monster, an angry spirit, but it actually turned out to be a real man. His name was Ray Robinson, and he actually has a really tragic story. He was severely electrocuted as a child and actually lost most of his facial features because of it, so he only came out at night due to his disfigurement, though in reality he did not emit a glow of any sort. He was actually a really nice guy who would chat with anybody who approached him, but because so many people were afraid of him and spreading these rumors about this night monster who glowed green, most of people treated him extremely cruel. So while people thought they were talking about this creepy ghost story, they were talking about a real man who went through something really tragic. And I'm glad he was able to finally talk about his story so people would stop spreading these crazy rumors. Alright, next we have Blue Mist Road. Blue Mist Road is actually named Irwin Road and is located in the North Hills area of Pittsburgh. A variety of urban legends populate the spooky stretch of road that is said to be shrouded in a blue mist by night. Now, apparently there are these two lovers' headstones that are on the side of the road, and whenever there's a full moon, they touch together, which is interesting. There's also an old building nearby that is said to be the home of a witch. And there is also another house that is said to be a home populated by little people who will chase visitors. People also see this strange creature on the road all the time. It's said to be half dog, half deer, and half human. It apparently lives in the woods and will chase anybody who goes down this road. It's trying to like protect its territory. People who have traveled to Blue Mist Road in hopes of finding these ghostly entities have mostly only found disgruntled residents. So people still live down this road and they're really tired of people driving down here trying to find monsters, but many people say the monsters are real, so take it for what you will. Next, we have something called the Bus to Nowhere. It is said to be mass transportation for Philadelphia's lost and hopeless people. It is said that the bus only appears to those that are left truly distraught and alone by the most tragic circumstances imaginable. So if something really bad happens in your life and it's extremely traumatizing and changes you forever, this bus will apparently appear to you. Passengers on the mystical bus sit too dazed by misery to interact with one another or look at any of the other passengers. So you get on the bus and sit down and just stare into nothingness for hours, days, months, even years. And apparently once you come out of this daze is when you're allowed to get off of the bus. So it's supposed to mean that once you're able to get over the trauma that you've been through, then you're allowed to get off. Once you exit, you will have no memory of your time on the bus, though legend states that some have been riding the bus for years, and some people say that some never ever get off the bus because some people can never get past their trauma. So it's actually a really dark and sort of depressing urban legend, to be honest. But yeah, if you're ever sad and hopeless and this bus comes to you, you can decide if you want to get on it or not. Next, we have something called the Storm Hag. Though Pennsylvania is surrounded by land, they do have access to Lake Erie, a member of the Great Lakes, which are notorious for their violent, unpredictable storms. Presque Isle is an area of lake notable for large numbers of shipwrecks and disappearances. Now, this is where the Storm Hag is said to live. She's apparently at the very bottom of this lake, and she only emerges to feast upon sailors. She has venomous nails, strong wraith-like arms, green pointed teeth, slimy green skin, and cat-like eyes. And apparently these creepy cat eyes are the last thing her victims ever see. And just like sirens, she'll actually sing with this beautiful voice to entice these sailors, and then she'll eat them. To this day, they say that you can still hear her screaming underneath this lake. Alright, then we have a place called Grumblethorpe, which sounds like the name of a goblin or something. This haunted home not only has one of the best names that a haunted house could possibly have, but also has very active spirits. During the Battle of Germantown, British General James Agnew made Grumblethorpe his headquarters. He was wounded wounded there and bled out in the front parlor of the house, where the bloodstain can still be seen to this day. It is said that black mist will actually rise from the bloodstain on the ground, and then that black mist will roam around the house, which is terrifying. Now, apparently this is the spot that the bloodstain actually is. I can't really see it. I was like really squinting to try and see it with this picture, but if you see it, let me know. So the first place we're going to talk about in California, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about because they just recently made a movie about this house. We are going to be talking about the Sarah Winchester house. Now, I watched this movie with Ty like 4 months ago, and I had to turn it off halfway because honestly, I didn't think it was that good. I really didn't like it that much. And I mean, if you loved that movie, that's great, but I feel like they didn't tell the story the way they should have, and it just was kind of bleh. So that is why today I'm going to be telling you guys the story in my own words, in my own opinions. And just so you know, there are so many different versions of the story of what happened at the Sarah Winchester house. So many people have told it in different ways. So people aren't really sure which version is the true one, but I'm gonna tell you about what I researched and just sort of take it for what you will. So Sarah Winchester was married, and unfortunately her husband died in 1881. She was so upset and distraught by this, understandably, so she decided to reach out to a psychic medium. This psychic medium decided to have a seance with her. And during this very scary seance, Sarah was told that she was cursed. Apparently, the Winchester family that she married into had killed a lot of people. It says that tons of people were slain by the Winchester rifle, and because of that, Sarah was forever cursed by the Winchester fortune. The medium basically told her that she was haunted by hundreds of spirits, which is something you never want to hear. And the spirits were telling her that they wanted her to move to California to build them a house. The spirits wanted her to build them a house. Imagine being told that by a psychic. Like, you just go see a psychic one day and she's like,
yeah, so you're cursed and there's about 400 spirits following you and they want you to build them a mansion. It's super easy, I know.
I would be like, yeah, no. Tell them I just don't have the funds for that. Anyways, Sarah accepted their proposal, which is super nice of her. So she moved to California to find a place to build this house, and every single night at midnight, she would have a seance with these spirits. She would like ring this bell at midnight to let the spirits know it was time to have their seance. She would communicate through a Ouija board, which is something I would never, don't ever do that, it's not good. But the spirits every night would basically give her building instructions for how to build this house. Like, these spirits were really smart. They knew what they were doing. They knew like architecture. So to please these spirits' wishes, she made sure the house was being built 24/7 every single day of the year. So there was never a time that the house was not being added on to. She had this fear that if construction stopped, she would die. But here's the thing, Sarah didn't like these spirits. She didn't want them around her. As much as it seemed like she was trying to please them and build them a house, it wasn't out of her own will. She was actually just really afraid of them. So she decided she would be sneaky and confuse the spirits. So she made sure that as the house was being built, she almost made it like a maze for the spirits. So she would have staircases that led to nowhere. So there'd be this staircase in her house that basically just went up to the ceiling, and that's it, they just stopped. She would also have doors in the house that would open up to a wall. They wouldn't go into rooms, they would just have a wall when you open the door. She just wanted to make this house super confusing for the spirits, so they would be more occupied with trying to figure out how to get around the house than bothering her. She would even make sure to sleep in a different room every single night to keep the spirits off of her trail. She had number 7s carved everywhere into the house because she thought it was a lucky number and would maybe keep her safe. But she also had the number 13 carved into the house, which she thought was a lucky number, but we all know number 13 is not so lucky all the time. Some people like to say she was just a crazy lady and all of this was in her head, and after her husband passed, she just went bonkers. So to this day, we're not really sure if it was spirits or if it was just her mind going away, flitting away. But there are tours of the Winchester house all of the time, and tour guides usually seem to exaggerate her story and twist it. So the tour guides might be the reason why we have so many different versions of what actually happened. But I just find like her story really interesting, and I would love to see the house eventually in my lifetime. The next thing we're gonna talk about is kind of an urban legend to California. It's called the Charman of Ojai, California. I hope I'm saying that right. It's Ojai? Ojai? Ojai, California is an odd place, people say. It's interesting because it's a mix of rural country with residents that have lived there forever, and the other half is kind of a place where celebrities go to vacation with the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. So it's like rural, but also popular with celebrities. It's like a mix of everything. But everything is set in the stunning natural splendor of the Ojai Valley, with beautiful orchards and hiking trails. There's still a big part of that area that's just wilderness. People have been going there to camp for a long time, and one of the scariest campfire stories that people tell around the fire is about the Charman. People to this day are unsure if this campfire story is real or fake, just to scare people. But it's been repeated so often over the years that a lot of people in Ojai, California really think that it's real. They'll swear up and down that the Charman is actually out there. So I'm gonna tell you the story of the Charman. Get ready. So Ojai, California is a very hot valley and one of the driest places in California. And you guys all know what happens when you have a really dry area. It can have a lot of forest fires, which is a terrible thing to ever happen. So there was a fire that broke out in 1948, and it was a particularly large fire, bigger than they've ever seen before. It burned a huge chunk of the valley. Tons of people who lived there had to flee for their lives. It was a really horrible event. Now, there was this isolated cabin that was sort of far off in the hills of Ojai, away from everybody else. And this cabin was like in the middle of the forest where this fire was happening. There was a man who lived in this cabin with his young son, and they sort of kept their distance from people. They were kind of like shut-ins. And it says that the people who lived in Ojai, California kind of forgot about them because they never really saw them. Well, their cabin was directly in the line of where the wildfire was happening, and so their entire place just sort of lit up in flames. The father unfortunately didn't make it, but the son got out, but he was horribly injured. He was burned up. Honestly, it was amazing he was even walking. But for some reason, this boy didn't try to run to get help. He sort of stayed and hid in one of the bushes by the burned up cabin. So when the police finally arrived at the scene and saw what took place, this boy for some reason was afraid of the police and decided to run away. So all these police saw was this burned kid running up the hill, and they never saw him ever again. It says he ran into the hills, and that was the last time anyone saw him up close. He had become the Charman of Ojai, California, nothing short of a monster. So this is honestly a really sad story. I hope it's not true. It could honestly just be a scary campfire story, but people always say if you're ever hiking in this area, if you're camping in this area, there is a chance that you'll see him, and he's not a very pleasant sight because of what happened to him. There was actually a story that came out a few years ago where a teenage boy was hiking in the forest, and he claimed the Charman ran up and stole his jacket from him. Don't really know how accurate that claim is or how real that claim is, but people apparently see the Charman all the time. So I just found that really intriguing. And I would also love to know if any of you guys that are watching live near any of these places that I'm talking about. Wow. The last thing we're gonna be talking about is the ghost of the Hollywood sign. I find this very intriguing because I went to California, when was it? 2 years ago? And I was right by the Hollywood sign. I got pictures of it, like I was right there. This story is also very tragic. I feel like when it comes to most ghost stories, they're obviously going to be tragic because it involves someone passing away, usually tragically, and their spirit lingers wherever they passed away. So you're never really gonna have like a happy paranormal story. On the night of September 18th, 1932, actress Peg Entwistle made her way up the steep slope of Mount Lee in Los Angeles to sit on the famous Hollywood sign. And back then when it happened, the Hollywood sign was actually spelled Hollywoodland, which I never knew about. That's kind of cool to know. She climbed up a 50-foot ladder to stand on top of the H, and she was up there looking over Hollywood at all of the lights and the glamour, and then she unfortunately jumped. And obviously it's a really high up ladder, so she didn't make it through the fall. She was found the next day by a hiker, and since then people have been spotting her spirit all around the Hollywood sign. Over the years, park rangers have reported seeing a pretty blonde woman dressed in 1930s clothing wandering around the park's path. She's always described as looking sad, and whenever anybody approaches her, she vanishes. She most often appears late at night when conditions are foggy, and she is often accompanied by the strong scent of gardenias, and that is said to be Peg's favorite fragrance. She always wore toward that smell of perfume. Gardenia is a flower, right? But that's true for a lot of spirits. A lot of the times when you come across one, it comes with a scent as well, whether that be like cigar smoke, perfume. Sometimes it's like a scent of rot, which is usually meaning it's a bad spirit. But here's another encounter with someone seeing her. As a couple was walking their dog along the Beechwood Canyon Trail of the park, their dog began to behave strangely. He was whimpering and cowering behind them, and this couple had no idea what was wrong. Suddenly, this woman appeared in front of them in out-of-date clothing, so something from the 1930s. She apparently looked very dazed and confused and sad, like people like to describe her, and when they went to approach her, she vanished. So yeah, this happens to people all the time, and it's weird thinking that I was right there and didn't know this story back then. I wish I kind of did. Okay, so the first place we're going to be talking about is the Tutwiler Hotel. The Tutwiler Hotel was opened in 1914 with a major investment from Major Tutwiler. Guests as well as staff in the hotel have so many ghost stories to tell. The most notable was from a bartender who used to work at the hotel. He had so many paranormal experiences that all happened in 1995. The lights in the bar were left on for a week after closing time, and the boss got quite angry with him, especially because he was new and didn't seem to be following the guidelines. So he would always turn the lights off at closing time, but they would constantly turn on again by themselves. So after turning off the lights 4 times, he finally left to go home. Imagine how frustrating that would be. Like your boss is telling you, hey, make sure the lights are off, and every time you do, they just like turn back on. The next day, the manager once again angrily asked why the lights were on. Imagine being that manager. You hire this new guy and he just won't follow any instructions. But little do you know that it's literally not his fault at all. So the bartender tried to explain this to the manager, but he would just not believe him. This happened for 5 nights in a row, and on the 6th night, the manager called the bartender and told him to come to work immediately. When he got there, there was a complete multi-course meal with candles and a bottle of wine. So literally when the manager went to open the bar in the morning, there was a whole table set up for an entire meal. Many people believe that it was the ghost of Tutwiler, for which the hotel was named after. So in order to stop him from making a mess again, he would call out Tutwiler each night to tell him good evening and not to make a mess. And since they've been doing that, they haven't had any more paranormal activity. Isn't that crazy? You literally have to tell the ghost good evening or he'll make a mess. And there's also a ghost there that people call the Knocker, which is a freaky name as it is. Several guests have reported loud, rapid knocks on their room door, only for them to quickly jump and open it to see nobody standing there. This ghost is known as the Knocker. It is believed to be a male spirit because he wakes women up with his knocking during the night. I don't know how that would make him be a male ghost per se, which is interesting. But oh my gosh, imagine being at this hotel and just hearing like do 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 like in the middle of the night. No. Okay, the next place we're gonna talk about is Bear Creek Swamp in Prattville. Swamps are usually pretty creepy at the best of times, but Bear Creek Swamp specifically has a large number of creepy stories to tell. There have been sightings of phantom cars, strange orbs flying around, along with a 4-foot tall strange apparition that appears in front of cars all of a sudden. Like imagine just driving by this swamp and all of a sudden this figure disappears in front of your car. People try their best not to pass the swamp after dark. Bear Creek Swamp is also said to be haunted by the ghost of a mother in search of her lost child. There is also an urban legend that says if you go to this swamp and say, "We have your baby," 3 times, she'll come and attack you. And I feel like that's so mean, like you're just there taunting her. And what's even weirder than all of these things is that 21 porcelain dolls were found mounted on the top of stakes in the middle of the swamp. That was back in 2014, and to this day nobody knows how they got there. I mean, this place is already creepy, and to add all of these mysterious porcelain dolls in the middle of the swamp, what? How did they get there? Like if someone's just playing a joke, they would have had to have swam and walked through all of that gross water to put those dolls there. Like how messed up do you have to be? The next place we're gonna talk about is the Sloss Furnaces, and this is located in Birmingham, Alabama. Between the years of 1882 to 1971, the Sloss Furnaces and its employees were turning coal and ore into steel. It also has a reputation as being one of the most haunted locations in Alabama and is listed as the top 100 places in the world for paranormal activity. That is pretty significant. You gotta think about all of the millions of places you can go around the world, and this place is in the top 100 ever. There are over 100 well-known stories of ghost encounters that have happened there. And through my research, I found out that it's a very hazardous place to work. Employees would constantly take dangerous risks in order to speed up production, so many of them lost their lives. And that's why so many people believe that these workers' spirits still linger there. Workers continuously complained of an unnatural presence in the worksite, and some even complained about being pushed from behind or being told by a mysterious voice to get back to work. 3 supervisors were even found unconscious and locked in a small boiler room. When they were finally let out, they all had the same story about a mysterious burned man who shouted at them to push more steel and then locked them away. Some say it's their mysterious boss who just disappeared one day, but today the furnaces are actually a historic monument. So there's daytime and nighttime tours that still go on there if you ever want to go and check it out. I know that I would if I was there. The next place is the Redmont Hotel in Birmingham, Alabama. This is Birmingham's oldest and most historic hotel, and it also has a very haunted past. Apparently, the ghost of a woman in white who passed away in the hotel has been seen on the 9th floor. Additionally, the ghost of a former owner named Clifford Stiles is said to walk the halls. People have also seen a very small ghost dog wandering around the hotel, which I find very interesting. Whenever I hear about like ghost pets, I'm so intrigued. But the most famous ghost of the hotel is that of a famous singer named Hank Williams, who has been seen in the room he stayed in right before his death. It is rumored to be Suite 301, but if you ask employees there, they won't actually tell you for sure. Strange occurrences such as the opening of doors and movement of furniture or baggage have also been reported by guests. I feel like wherever I research, there are so many haunted hotels, and that's such a popular thing. Like even where I live now, there are more haunted hotels than any other haunted locations. The next place is the Drish House, and I hope I say this right, but it's in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I feel like I'm gonna butcher so many of these names, so please forgive me. The Drish House has officially been named the most haunted place in Alabama. It was built in 1937 by Dr. John R. Drish over a 450-acre plantation. But unfortunately, Dr. Drish, who loved gambling and drinking, passed away in 1867 from falling down a stairway while drunk. His wife Sarah suddenly became so obsessed about planning his funeral, so much so that it became this huge, elaborate event. She even kept the candles from his funeral with the intense hope that they would be used at her own funeral. So she basically wanted her funeral to be the exact same as her husband's. But when she passed away in 1884, her family searched the house endlessly to find the candles, but they could not. This is said to have angered Sarah so much that she has come back to haunt the house. It's kind of a sad story because I feel like it's not really her family's fault. Her family literally tried to find these candles and could not. So she's a very angry soul and spirit who just lingers there because her funeral wasn't the same as her husband's. People say that she was the one who caused a fire in the 3rd-story tower by lighting the candles. Sometimes it will even just look like the 3rd floor is on fire through the windows, but whenever firemen arrive, there's absolutely nothing. So for so many years, the Drish House was just empty, no one ever went there, but apparently in 2015, it was totally remade. By 2016, the new owner had restored the estate and opened it up to the public as a historical and cultural place of interest. And so now you can actually rent out the place for like a corporate event, a party, or even a wedding. So if you want to have like a paranormal wedding, you could literally have one there. The next place we're going to talk about is the old Bryce Hospital. It is in Northport, Alabama. Bryce Hospital was a former insane asylum and had a reputation for treating its patients horribly, even verging on torture. And unfortunately, that was very common about insane asylums. People were never treated properly. It was built in the 1850s and opened in 1861. Visitors claim to feel hot and cold spots and see items moving of their own accord and hear ghostly sounds and footsteps. Some have even seen a tail of a doctor's coat going through the hallway. There have been screams, scuffling of feet, doors opening and closing, just your usual paranormal stuff. There was this girl named April Moody who visited the hospital with a couple of her friends, and here's what she had to say about her experience. It is by far the creepiest place I have ever been, and I have been to many scary places. We would turn off the lights from time to time to see if anything would happen. One time we did this and my friend heard a noise. At the same time, I saw something move. We then saw a fresh footprint on the floor, and when we turned off the lights, we both thought we heard a small child running towards us. We turned the light back on and didn't see anything. That is so creepy, and I feel like people are so extremely extremely brave. Like, I could never go to an old hospital like this and turn all of the lights off and just sit there and listen. And it's so cool that people can. Like, I'm pretty sure Brittany44 would love to do that, which is awesome, but I feel like I'm so terrified. The next place is the Gaines Ridge Dinner Club, and this is in Camden, Alabama. The Gaines Ridge Dinner Club has been named the most haunted restaurant in Alabama. The popular restaurant is located in an 1820s antebellum home and is well known for its family of ghosts. Several guests have reported hearing screaming, the smell of pipe smoke. They've seen a floating woman in the windows, the cries of babies, and apparitions in mirrors of a tall, bearded man in black. So people have said that while they're like in the bathroom or like checking their hair in a mirror, they'll look behind them in the mirror and there that guy will be. The owner reports her experience with the ghosts as ghost truths instead of ghost stories because she believes completely that these things happened to her. She says she heard the mysterious scream of a coworker who denied calling out to her even though they both heard the yelling. The last place we're going to talk about is the Sweetwater Mansion located in Florence, Alabama. There are many stories about various paranormal activities that are said to take place in the mansion. Countless apparitions have reportedly been seen in the grounds. There's a story of a caretaker who claimed to have seen a casket with the body of a Confederate soldier lying in one of the downstairs rooms, and it quickly disappeared when she went to go tell somebody about what she saw. There's also a room in the house that constantly locks women inside of it. One of the mansion's caretakers, named Amay Letty Region, was so terrified of her experience being locked in there one day that she would only live in 2 rooms in the mansion and refuse to go anywhere else. And I don't blame her. Imagine just like taking care of the room, making the bed, and suddenly the door just locks and you can't get out. I would never go in there again. The house also has a mysterious area which is called the secret room. It has no door and can only be accessed through a small interior window. And no one knows what the purpose of that room is. Like, why is it there? No one can figure it out. What's the point of a room that you can't easily access? Investigators have also captured numerous photographs documenting these strange anomalies. One photograph was that of a distinct shape of a Civil War soldier standing outside of the property one evening. There have also been a ton of paranormal shows that have gone to investigate there, and they've caught a lot of stuff on camera. One time even a ceiling tile threw itself across the room. Get into the haunted locations in Arizona. The first place we're going to talk about is the Colossal Cave, and this was the location that kept popping up in my entire research looking up Arizona. This place is so haunted that there are a million articles about it. With more than 1,000 years of life surrounding the cave and another 100 years of tourism alone, it makes sense that many people have experienced haunted encounters. Many people in earlier decades have said to have died on the park grounds. And what's really sad is that specifically there were 2 little boys that passed away in the cave, so their spirits are said to be lingering there along with hundreds of other people's that unfortunately didn't make it when they were in the cave. Experts also believe that limestone helps signal paranormal activity, and that is so interesting to me because the Colossal Cave is literally made out of limestone, and I did not know that limestone like conducts paranormal activity or attracts paranormal activity. I didn't know that like stone or rock could do that, so that's really interesting to me. Longtime Colossal Cave employees have all smelled the scent of tobacco at some point when no one in the vicinity had been smoking. And if you look at tourists who have gone there, a lot of their pictures they've taken have so many orbs all through the footage. And obviously, as you guys know, orbs could be a sign of roaming spirits. Sometimes it's dust, but sometimes it could actually be a spirit. Another employee described a time in which she saw a man in an off-limits area, and when she instructed him to get out of the forbidden place, he didn't listen to her, but with a blink of an eye, he disappeared. That freaks me out so much. Imagine working there and seeing a man in an area that's off limits because it's dangerous, and you're like, hey buddy, like get out of that area, and he like turns and like disappears. No. And what sucks is I feel like no one would believe me if that happened to me. Another employee was giving a cave tour to a family. After one of the young girls took a photo of a passageway inside the cave, she looked back at the photo and she said she saw a face in the picture. When taking another picture of the same spot, the face was wasn't there, and the first photograph had disappeared entirely. And what's weird is that where this little girl took the photo is apparently where the two boys passed away. So the fact that she saw a face in her photo exactly where the boys died, apparently that is just mind-blowing. And the fact that the photo disappeared on its own. I've heard of that happening so many times where people go to like haunted locations and take a video clip, and when they come back and try and upload their footage, it's not there anymore. Thankfully, that has not happened to me because I've been to so many haunted houses and that's never like happened to my footage, but fingers crossed, knock on wood, it doesn't happen to me. What's really cool is that the cave has ghost tours once a month. I don't know why they only do it once a month, but if I'm ever there, I am going on that cave tour, even though I'm afraid of caves because I'm like slightly claustrophobic. But anyways, the next place we're gonna talk about is the Lost Dutchman State Park. Now, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I hear Dutchman, I always think about SpongeBob. Like, you know the flying Dutchman in SpongeBob, like the little. Sorry, we'll continue. Though a scenic state park, the Lost Dutchman is a historic and very spooky place. There's a myth that the Lost Dutchman's mine is hidden in the mountains, which is also supposedly haunted and guarded by spirits. Dozens of people have lost their lives searching for the Lost Dutchman mine because of the gold that is said to be there. And people have dug so many holes at the foot of these mountains trying to find the gold and trying to find the mine that if you go there and you're hiking there, you can see all of the holes that people have dug. And that could also be why people frequently disappear there when they're on the hike. Maybe they've fallen into these holes. Visitors say that while they're in the mountains, they have seen a mysterious light in the distance. I have read so many reviews on this park, and so many people say that while they're up hiking in the mountains, they always see this strange light. And whenever I hear of strange lights, I always think about aliens, but that's just my opinion. The next place we're gonna talk about is the Thornton Road Domes, and the minute I saw a picture of these things, I was so creeped out. They look really weird and like ominous. There's a very eerie aura coming from the unusual looking UFO-shaped concrete structures located on a 5-acre patch of desert terrain. They were once an electronics manufacturing plant built by Intercon Technology in 1982, but the factory was left unfinished on the side of Thornton Road in Casa Grande, where the company went bankrupt. So now they just sit there in the middle of this desert, completely abandoned, completely unused, and people are saying that there is a lot of paranormal activity that happens there. And not only are these domes surrounded by paranormal encounters, but they also house rebellious teenage parties because teenagers see that these are abandoned and empty and they're like, hey, let's throw parties there. So if you ever go and like look inside, there's like bottles everywhere, there's garbage everywhere because of all the parties that take place in there. People swear they see shadowy figures, hear whispering noises, sounds of children screaming, and footsteps. Other online theories suggest that some members of a coven practice rituals in the domes because people have found like remains of animals and different household objects in these domes and like remnants of like fires, and like people just think that rituals happen there, which is kind of disturbing. But I read somewhere that this guy attended a party in one of these domes and all of the people started seeing these shadowy figures everywhere, and it sounded I would not want to go there, really. The next place we're going to talk about is the Birdcage Theater. I kind of like the name of that. It sounds kind of cool. This theater used to be known as the wildest, wickedest night spot between Bazin Street and the Barbary Coast. It was a really popular place in the 1800s, so it's a pretty old theater now. But it's located in a place called Tombstone. Isn't that so bizarre? I've never heard of like a town called Tombstone until now. What? It's said the theater is home to 26 ghosts. Music and voices have been heard in the middle of the night as if a big party is being thrown. Guests and staff have reported seeing ghosts of cowboys who never left the property, and others have claimed to have been touched or pushed by unseen forces. And this theater offers nightly ghost tours there for brave people who want to experience this activity themselves. So this theater knows that it's haunted, so they always offer tours there, which is kind of cool. The next place we're going to talk about is Horseshoe Cafe in Benson. The Horseshoe Cafe is located right across the street from the town's train station. The cafe opened in 1938 and has been a landmark to locals and drifters alike, with its horse-head-shaped neon sign and large mural on the side of the 2-story building that depicts 3 cowboys riding on horses. It is said that at some point in the cafe's history, there was an old woman living upstairs, like above the cafe, and she unfortunately passed away. So she is said to have been ghosting up the place ever since. I have never heard of ghosting up the place place until I read this article. People have described seeing the woman looking out of the windows of the second story or walking around near the staircase and even showing up in the back of the restaurant. There's also a ghost dog that people see that apparently was the dog of the woman who passed away. People usually hear the dog barking from the second floor when there's not actually a dog there, so that's kind of interesting. The next place we're going to talk about is the Orpheum Theater. Constructed in the 1920s, the Orpheum Theater is no stranger to paranormal activity. The original owner, Harry Nace, passed away very mysteriously. And then there's also a ghost named Maddie who reportedly whacks guests on the head and has even been caught photobombing snaps. Okay, this ghost whacks guests on the head? What? That is so rude. I'm sorry, it's like not funny, but it is funny. Guests have also spoken of unexplainable purring said to come from the theater's resident cat. While the latter doesn't sound so scary, being whacked on the head by a disgruntled ethereal being is very disturbing. Yeah, like after hearing about that, the purring cat does not sound scary at all because Maddie sounds terrifying. Ghost chasers can experience the paranormal activity firsthand, as the Orpheum Theater offers ghost tours throughout October for those bold enough to venture into the dark corners and normally off-limit spots said to be haunted by spirits. I love how most of these places have ghost tours. Like, that is the best thing ever. And the last place we're going to talk about is the Casey Moore's Oyster House. I have never heard of a haunted oyster house until now. That's kind of interesting. Built over 106 years ago, Okay, I'm not even kidding. I heard the loudest growl beside me. Oh my gosh, what the heck? I wonder if I caught that on camera. I just had this like jolt of like shock. Okay, let's continue. Built over 106 years ago, it first served as a private residence and also a boarding house. Nearby neighbors have witnessed a dapperly dressed couple dancing throughout the upstairs bedrooms in the middle of the night. It's speculated that the duo may be specters of the original owners of the home, named Mary and William Moore. Other regular sightings include the ghost of an Arizona State University student who used to live in the boarding house. Apparently, the young woman with black hair and light eyes suffered from an untimely death at the hands of her boyfriend. That is so sad. So a lot of stuff goes down there. I am so interested in going to like a haunted restaurant to see what happens, and there are so many haunted restaurants near me, like near my house, that I could actually go to. I really want to get back into ghost hunting videos. I really miss those, and there are so many places near me, so I should go. Alright, so there are a ton of terrifying, strange places in Michigan, and one of the places I really wanted to talk about today is called the Michigan Triangle. There are so many conspiracies about it, so many people went missing in this triangle. It's actually so terrifying that I have to make it its own video, so I'll probably do that later this week because it's so interesting. If you guys like missing persons cases and conspiracies and stuff like that, you don't want to miss that video, so stay tuned for that. In today's video, we're mostly going to be talking about the places that are on land. Alright, the first place we're going to be talking about is the singing sands of Bet Grice. On the south side of Keweenaw Peninsula is a beautiful beach that contains more than meets the eye. The legend is that a Native American woman lost her love to Lake Superior, and because of that she spent the rest of her life on the beach crying, calling out to him. So the white sand still calls to him to this day. So the legend goes that you can reawaken her crying voice by going onto this beach, picking up the sand in the palm of your hand, and if you pat or brush the surface, you will literally hear her voice come out of it, which is crazy. However, this only works if you're on the beach of Bet Grice. If you leave the beach with the sand, it's not gonna work anymore. People that have heard it sing have tried to put the sand in a bottle to take it home so they could always hear the voice. But like I said, once they leave that specific beach, it stops. Alright, the next place is called Dog Lady Island. If you head into Michigan from Ohio, you might pass Plum Creek, and then you'll see the decrepit Fox Island, or as locals like to call it, Dog Lady Island. Now, this island used to be used for a number of different things. Religious retreats for women, it was a pig farm, it was a garbage dump at one point. Fox Island never ever became a thriving community. By the 60s, only one couple lived in a mansion on the island, and as the story goes, a gas leak broke broke out in their house, which literally burned it to the ground. Shortly after, the man passed away, leaving his wife and their pack of dogs all to theirself on this island. Over the years, it is said that she lost her mind and eventually became part of the pack, chasing those that ventured onto her island away on all fours. And then the legend goes that eventually her pack of dogs turned against her and ate her. So, many teens in the area have visited the island over the years and claim to have seen glowing eyes from the brush, along with hearing animalistic growls and howls. And according to like the places that I was researching, there's actually a number that you can call the dog lady at, and you'll hear her growl and bark, and it's super weird. I couldn't find the number, so if you guys know the number, please DM me on Instagram or something, because I'll call it for a vlog. You know I will. All right, the next legend is called Luke the Spook. In the late 1800s, a man named Dr. Lucas was requested to give some medical assistance. He obligated, but on his way home, his horse and buggy careened off a bridge and the good doctor was killed. Since then, travelers on Romeo Plank Road have reportedly seen a strange old-fashioned lantern light that seems to be guiding them down the road. Others have even claimed to see the actual horse and buggy going down the road behind their car, which is terrifying. So be careful out there. Next, we have a Michigan legend about April Fools, which is kind of scary because April Fools is like in a week. There's a sad legend about this girl called Lonely Lisa that attended an unnamed school in Michigan in the 60s. I'm not too sure why all these legends don't say what the name of the school was, but alas, this is the legend. She didn't have any friends and was bullied every single day, and they would call her that horrible nickname all the time, over and over again. Lonely Lisa. Lonely Lisa. One day on April Fool's, after her bullies had been pranking her all morning long, she stood up abruptly in class and told the teacher she didn't feel well and needed to go to the office to call home. But instead, she walked out the front doors and entered the forest just off the school property. No one knew why she went there. Was she trying to run away? Was she trying to hide from her bullies? And when she didn't come home that night, people started looking for her. And they saw that there were footprints leading into the dark woods. And when they followed them, they found her lying against a tree. She hadn't made it through the night, and it looked like an animal had attacked her. The next year on April Fool's, a couple of the girls who had been bullying Lisa received unknown phone calls. And when they picked it up, they heard Lisa's voice whispering to them to meet her in the forest. During recess, they all went into the woods and never came out again. In fact, none of them were ever found at all. So each year after that passed, more and more people would get calls from Lisa. So much so that they would expect it to happen every single April Fool's. And then it stopped only happening in Michigan and went from state to state to state. So watch out, because Lonely Lisa might call you this April Fool's. Don't go into any forests. All right, the next place is called McKinnick Island's Drowning Pool. McKinnick Island, located in northern Michigan, is a small island that's a major tourist destination throughout the state and Midwest in general. It's also home to the mysterious drowning pool urban legend. According to this story, throughout the 1700s and the 1800s, 7 women were accused of witchcraft and were taken to this drowning pool for a test. The women then had rocks tied to their feet and were tossed into the waters. According to this superstition, it was said that if the women really were witches, they would be able to save themselves from drowning. And you can still visit the lagoon where the trials allegedly occurred. And visitors often report seeing phantom figures, as well as unusual and random splashing in the water. So a very sad story with these poor women being attached to rocks and expected to get out. And unfortunately, that was what occurred a lot in history. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear the state Connecticut and try and pair it up with something paranormal, my first thought is the Haunting in Connecticut movie. Now, this was a very popular movie that came out a while ago, and the reason it was so popular was because it was based on a true story. What happens in the movie actually happened to a real family that bought a house in Connecticut. The Snedeker family rented an old house in 1986 in Selvington, Connecticut. So it was the parents, a daughter, and 3 sons. While they were exploring their new home, Carmen found strange items in the basement. And those strange items turned out to be tools that were used by morticians investigations. And if you didn't know what that was, it's basically someone who has a job that entails taking care of a person's body after they have passed away to get them ready for the funeral. So as you can imagine, this family found out that their house used to be a funeral parlor. And soon after, their eldest son began seeing ghosts and terrifying visions. And these ghost experiences began to spread to the other family members in the house. There was this one time where the mother was mopping the floor in the house, and all of a sudden the water from the mop on the floor turned into blood. So they called the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren to help them with their situation. Gotta pose. Now, what happens to this family just continues to get darker and darker, and actually a lot of the stuff that happened I can't even talk about on this channel. But if you want to know, a lot of it is in the movie, and you can find a lot of documentaries on that family and the house. But what's crazy is if you drive by the real house to this day, there are people who still choose to live there even after what happened. And I feel like you gotta be very, very brave to do that. And since we were just speaking about Ed and Lorraine Warren, they actually have a museum in Connecticut that holds a collection of the haunted objects they found over the years of their investigations. The real Annabelle doll is even there. They have so many artifacts in that museum, it would be like a whole other video to talk about. And I think I read somewhere online that they're actually going to be changing that museum location because of the unfortunate loss of Ed and Lorraine Warren. But I just wanted to bring that up because that was also a huge part of Connecticut. The next thing we're moving on to is a story about Midnight Mary. On October 15th, 1872, a 48-year-old woman named Mary Hart unexpectedly collapsed at noon in her New Haven home and died exactly 12 hours later at midnight. She was buried in the city's Evergreen Cemetery. Now, the next night her aunt had this very vivid and disturbing dream, and in this dream she had a vision that Mary had actually been buried alive. She was so sure that this dream was telling her the truth that she had Mary's coffin dug up out of the ground and opened just to make sure that she was okay. And to their horror, they found fingernail scratches all over the inside of the coffin. At least that's the legend. There's no real proof of that happening, but I did a whole other video about how people were often, unfortunately, buried alive just because healthcare wasn't very good back then. So if someone fainted for over 12 hours, they were like, oh, they're dead, without really knowing for sure, which is horrible. So people say that Mary wanders around the cemetery at night, and if someone visits her grave at midnight, they will be doomed to a horrible death. Her gravestone reads, "The people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away," which is definitely very eerie and spooky to read. And Evergreen is still an open cemetery that people go to this day, but people are actually discouraged from walking around the cemetery at night, which is super creepy. The next thing we're gonna talk about is strange music that's heard at Gardner Lake. Gardner Lake is famous for a house that has sunk 30 feet under the water. So there is literally an intact full house under the water of this lake. People call it the ghost house. There are actually vintage postcards for this lake that shows a house sinking through the ice and underwater. The house was said to have sunk after the owners tried to move it across a frozen lake. A heavy house across a frozen lake. So obviously the ice broke while they were trying to move the house and it sunk 30 feet under the water. Now, the family was only able to get a few of their possessions out of the house before it fully sunk. So all of the heavy stuff and all the really important stuff like a piano went down underwater with the house. So to this day, fishermen on the lake claim to hear odd, faint piano music with no source. And everyone agrees that the melodies come from below the surface. And they say that if you hear the piano music, you have to get away as fast as you can. There's this legend that people will follow the music into the water and swim towards the house and then unfortunately drown, which is so creepy. So this piano music in the water is sort of like a hypnotism thing. So I think it would be terrifying if you were swimming there or on a boat and just suddenly heard this melody. The next thing is a phenomenon called the Dark Day. 3 centuries ago, on May 19th in 1780, a phenomenon happened where the sky turned completely black one morning. And for the past 200 years, scientists and historians have been completely baffled trying to figure out what actually caused this strange event. The Dark Day was filled with panic and confusion among residents of the Northeast. Thousands left their workplace and went to churches to pray, fearing that the end of the world was near. Children were even released from their schools, so it was like everyone sort of dropped everything and ran. I mean, imagine walking outside, it's like 9 in the morning, it's sunny out, you're watering your plants, and suddenly the sky turns pitch black within an instant. People thought that something horrible was about to happen. It was as if the morning suddenly jumped ahead to midnight. People said there was also this very strange smell in the air, and scum began to float in all the lakes and rivers. So people for years and years have been wondering, was it some sort of weird phenomenon that was natural? Was it something more sinister and paranormal? All we know is that something like this hasn't happened since. And the last thing we're gonna talk about is called the Moodus noises. For centuries in the town of Moodus, odd noises have been heard. Spooky rumblings that have been described as sounding like everything from thunder to trees falling to the earth itself belching. They don't know what causes them, where they originated from, but the people of this town have heard these noises for hundreds of years. And as you guys know, I have done so many other videos on my channel about weird noises that people hear all over the world, and it is possible that the earth itself does make weird noises. But in the 1980s, scientists officially declared the sounds to be the noises of shallow micro earthquakes. So I think people have kind of accepted this explanation, but some people still believe that it's something more than that. Today's topic is Arkansas. So I just want to say I'm editing this video and I realized that I said Arkansas and not Arkansas, and I feel kind of dumb about it, and I almost don't want to post this video, but I'm going to anyway. I'm Canadian, I'm confused, English is hard, alright? Please forgive me as we move forward. Okay, alright, bye. Okay, so the first place we're going to talk about is Highway 365. I don't know what it is, but something about haunted roads really intrigued me, and I've said this before, but there are actually a few haunted roads near my house that I really want to go visit. So let me know down below if that'd be something you're interested in, because I have done a haunted road video before, but like there's more. There's more I can go to, so let me know. So let's start with the first story about this road. Years ago, a young man was driving south of Little Rock when he saw a young girl on the roadside. So it was this really nice man, and he offered to give her a ride in his car. He draped his coat around her shoulders because she was freezing and soaking wet. So she got into his car and she basically gave him the directions to her house. So he drove her to her house, which actually wasn't far from where he picked her up. And when he got out of his seat and walked over to her door to help her out of the car, when he opened her door, she wasn't there. So he was a little bit confused, but he still decided to walk up to the door of the house. So he knocked on the door, a woman answered, and he basically explained what just happened, how he picked up maybe this woman's daughter on the side of the road and tried to drop her off. And this is the really creepy part. This is what the lady replies to him. That young girl is my daughter who passed away years ago. She hitchhikes back home once a year. And the man, when he heard this, he was obviously shocked, and I don't think he believed her straight away. So the lady gave him directions to this little girl's grave. So he drove to her gravesite, and laying on top of her gravestone was this man's coat. I mean, I don't know if this story is necessarily scary. I feel like it gives me the creeps because I don't know, it's sad, but it's just eerie. It says it's a lovely tale of a residual haunting, which means a haunting that continues to occur over and over without any change in the story, as if it's looped on a recording. Yeah, I've heard a residual haunting before. It's usually like when there's an anniversary of someone's death or an anniversary of something really bad happening. On that time every year, the past will kind of replay. That might be the easiest way to describe it. It's almost as though the grief and sadness of the woman's loss is so strong that it burned itself into the ribbon of time itself. Aw, that's so sad. And I mean, any parent losing a child, that is absolutely devastating. Like, it rips a hole in your soul. So I mean, I can get how that would cause time to sort of loop. Okay, the next place we're gonna talk about is the Mount Holly Cemetery. So yet another cemetery. Several reports of paranormal sightings and photographs taken at the property have been made, including apparitions of people dressed in period clothing and bright lights and mists. This is a really common thing for cemeteries. I feel like any haunted cemetery in the world that you look up, it'll say that people have taken photos there and like ghosts are in the background, because you got to think about how many people are buried in a graveyard. Like, there's tons. And think about that time that I went to the Boston Mills Cemetery, and in the back of my footage there was that like creepy man standing there. Like, it's really easy to capture ghosts at cemeteries and graveyards. Some visitors have claimed that statues have been mysteriously relocated to the lawns of nearby houses. Excuse me? So the statues that were in this cemetery, like around the graves, mysteriously moved to like neighborhoods where people live, and it's on the front of their lawn. Imagine that happening to you. The sounds of a flute echo have also been heard, and trinkets and small items have been known to appear and disappear around the graves. Whenever I hear like flute in regards to something paranormal happening, I freak out, because as you know, the flute man has been a dream that I've had since I was a kid, and I hate flutes. I don't like flutes. The next place we're going to talk about is the 1886 Crescent Hotel and Spa. So I don't know if we've talked about a haunted spa before. That's really interesting, because a spa is supposed to be a place of like calm and happiness, but no. There's ghosts there. This spa is said to be one of the most popular haunted destinations. Visitors can stay overnight and take tours revealing the secret underground passages and the property's old morgue, and they can also hear the multitude of hauntings that have been reported throughout the years. That'd be so cool to be taken on a tour and shown secret passageways. I feel like that's a dream. Like, you know when you watch like medieval movies and stuff and there's like secret passages in the walls? I want to be there. The most well-known ghost of the Crescent is Michael, a stone cutter who helped build the hotel and who passed away from falling at the location of room 218. Is it just me, or does every haunted room start with a 2? Literally every haunted room I've ever talked about has like started with a 2. It's been like 200 and something. So that room is now the Crescent's most requested room. Yeah, like if I was there, I would stay there too. The next thing we're gonna talk about is kind of an urban legend. It's called The Lady in Black. And wasn't there like a movie called The Lady in Black? Or The Woman in Black, maybe it was called. But that has nothing to do with this one, by the way. This one is about lost love, and it's heartbreaking. In Arkadelphia, okay, that's not the word. In Arkadelphia, there we go. There are 2 universities, the Henderson State University and Wichita Baptist University, and there is a big rivalry between both schools. So according to the legend, back in the 1920s, there was a student from Henderson named Josh, and he was dating Jane, and Jane was from the other school, so the rivalry school. So his friends teased him and then threatened to not be his friend because she went to the other school. So his friends were not being very nice to him because he was dating Jane. They were threatening him and making fun of him and not letting him be around them while he was dating this other girl from this other school. He finally broke up with her after all the pressure, and it was at the worst time because he broke up with her at homecoming. She was so distraught she put on a black dress and veil and walked over to a cliff in her area, and I'm sure you can assume what she did next. It's a very sad story. And the locals say that every year around homecoming you can see her walking across campus looking for the guys that made her boyfriend break up with her. And they say that she always walks around in her homecoming outfit, so the black veil, black dress, it's ooh. The next urban legend that we're going to talk about is the White River Monster. And I feel like whenever I see monster, I get a little bit skeptical. I do believe in the paranormal wholeheartedly, but I feel like when it comes to monsters, I'm a little iffy. Like, sometimes it takes a lot of convincing. Since 1915, along the White River near Newport, the monster has appeared several times and has become a local legend. Locals call the monster Whitey, and sightings of him began in 1915. So it has one of the encounters right here that I'm going to read. It says on July 1st of 1937, a man named Bramlett Bateman, who was the owner of a plantation near the river, saw the monster. He reported it as having gray skin and being as wide as a car and 3 car lengths long. Do you guys realize how big that is? As news began to spread, construction of a huge rope net to capture the monster began, because of course when people find out about something crazy and different, they always want to capture it and kill it, which I don't think is always fair. But anyways, they started making this net. However, Whitey was not captured and the construction of the net stopped because of the lack of money and materials. So they couldn't make it, it'd have to be a really big net and they just couldn't afford it. So other witnesses described this monster as having a spiny back and 20 feet long. And just for more evidence, a trail of 3-toed 14-inch prints were found near the White River area. And I feel like that could just be like any animal, but they were convinced it was this one. So it says there have been no recent sightings, but there have been hundreds of stories about people seeing Whitey over the years and in history. It is hypothesized to be anything from a huge fish to an elephant seal, though none of the theories fully explain Whitey. I just spit everywhere. Okay, the last place we're gonna talk about is the Peel Mansion. There always has to be a haunted mansion. Peel Mansion was built in 1875 by Samuel Peel, and it is now said to be haunted by both Samuel himself and his daughter Minnie Bell. Minnie is commonly cited as a woman in white wandering around Peel Mansion, and she is often heard playing the piano just as beautifully as she did in life. Although it is said that if anyone enters the room while she is playing the music, it will abruptly stop. Wow, something about piano music is absolutely haunting. Even when I played the piano, like certain songs you can make it just sound beautifully haunting. So imagine just sleeping and suddenly hearing this like piano music. And then Samuel is said to haunt his former home, and his spirit has been seen in various parts of the house. And this place has ghost walks every Tuesday and Thursday, which is really cool. I love when buildings embrace like the haunted aspect of them and allow ghost tours, because a lot of places don't like to be affiliated with like the paranormal. So I love when places do. Anyway. Okay, let's jump right into it and talk about some very creepy urban legends and haunted places in South Carolina. The first thing we're going to be talking about is called the legend of Julia Lagar. And this is actually one of the creepiest stories that I've ever read in my life. In the mid-1800s, a woman named Julia Lagar came to visit family. And it is said that she suddenly became very ill with a fever, and she actually slipped into a coma. Her family called the doctor pronounced her dead. Much to the dismay and sorrow of her family, they put her body into the family mausoleum. And a mausoleum is basically this freestanding building that holds multiple people after they pass away instead of just one. It's kind of like a tomb in some way. Well, after they placed Julia to rest in there, life went on, and 15 years later they had to reopen the mausoleum to place another family member in there that had passed away. But when they opened the door to the mausoleum, they found that Julia's skeleton was right at the door instead of where they had laid her to rest. So it seemed like she had never actually been dead at all. But instead she was in a coma so deep that her heart rate was so faint that the doctor actually thought she had passed away when she hadn't. And unfortunately this happened to people a lot back in the day because medical care was not the same as it is today. So people were often buried and put in tombs when they weren't actually dead. So they put the girl's remains back where they were supposed to be and sealed and locked the door once again. But this is not where the story ends, guys. When the family returned the next day, the door to the mausoleum was open. And every time they closed it and went back the next day, it still was open. Even though they locked it, it would still open again. They say that now there is no door, and her spirit can rest because she knows that no one else will be locked inside the mausoleum. So it was like her spirit never wanted the door to be closed again because of what happened to her. It's so sad. And people always just say they get this horrible sad feeling anytime they go there to visit where she was buried. Okay, this next urban legend is called the Third-Eyed Man. Under the University of South Carolina, there are many steam tunnels, which is where the Third-Eye Man is said to be lurking. The first sighting of this monster was in 1949. This student named Nicholas said that him and his friends saw this silver-looking man entering the tunnels one night. They said he looked very strange and literally looked silver. They reported it and no one was able to find out who this man was. Then in April of 1950, a police officer actually encountered this silver man. The officer said he saw this silver man crouched in a corner eating a chicken. And when the officer shone the flashlight flashlight at the man, he turned his head and the officer saw that he had 3 eyes, 2 here and 1 on his forehead. So the police officer called for backup, but by the time everyone got there, the man was gone. He had run further into the tunnels and no one was able to find him. And the next time this third-eyed man was seen was in the 60s. Now, like I said, there are catacombs or tunnels beneath the university, and a group of friends thought it would be fun to explore them one evening. But when they went around one of the corners, they saw this crippled man standing there. He looked silver in color, and he swung at the boys with a pipe. Now, only one of the guys actually suffered any injuries, but it was only like minor bruising and cuts. But they all told the police officers that this man had a third eye. Since then, the entrance to the tunnels have been sealed, and so far there have been no other reported sightings of the third-eyed man. And the University of South Carolina says that there's nothing down there, and they want the students to know that no one's allowed to trespass through the tunnels. So this is where the next strange story comes in. It's called the three-eyed doll. Back in the 90s, a girl who was attending the university found a doll lying face down on the school grounds. It was covered in mud and leaves and it was barely even visible. She said she wouldn't even have seen the doll if she was in a hurry. When she turned the doll over, she was shocked to see 3 eyes staring back at her and wondered who would ever want such a creepy doll. Was it dropped by a child? Was it created as a prank by one of the students? Was it like a weird project somebody was doing? She brought it back to her dorm to show her roommates, and they told her it must have been made to honor the silver man in the tunnels. Now, this girl had never heard of the silver man with 3 eyes before, so all of her friends told her these stories. And because she heard those things, she decided to keep the doll displayed in her dorm from that day forward. And she felt this strange connection to this 3-eyed man that she had never met before. And it's still a mystery to her where the doll had originally come from and why it was made with 3 eyes, especially on a campus known for such a terrifying legend. Comment down below if you would keep a 3-eyed doll if you found it. I probably would. Next, we have Crybaby Bridge. Now, there's actually a few bridges in the States with this same name, and I'm pretty sure I've briefly talked about one before, but the one I will discuss is the one in Anderson, South Carolina, and this particular bridge has quite a history. What's strange is that it was originally built in Virginia in 1919, and then in 1952 it was moved to South Carolina. Now, there are a few different ways that the creepy story goes, but the most popular one is that there was a horrible accident one night. A mother lost her baby to the flow of the river, and it is said that if you go on this bridge late at night, you can hear the crying of a baby, and if you are lucky, you may even see the mother walking up and down the bridge, searching for the child she lost so long ago. So the story is actually really heartbreaking, and it would definitely be very eerie to see a ghostly crying mother walking back and forth on the bridge. No thank you. The next urban legend is called the Lizard Man, and this is such a bizarre legend. Described as being taller than the average man, the Lizard Man is said to be muscular, covered with dark hair and scaly lizard-like skin on its face, and it's said that he has 3 fingers on his hands and his toes. Now, they say this beast is extremely strong, so much so it can lift a car, it can throw a car, it can destroy very, very large things. And there have been quite a few reported sightings of this creature around South Carolina. The first sighting was in 1988. This man was walking through a field and he saw this creature start to run towards him. He said it had these red glowing eyes, it was super fast, so the man ran back to his car as fast as he could. This creature jumped on the roof of his car, causing this major indent. So he had to start his car super fast and drove away. The creature fell off, but that's not the only account of this creature attacking someone in their car. There have been so many accounts, and this creature is always described in the same way. There have also been times where people have gone out to the parking lot and their car has been like chewed up by something. So that's so bizarre. And the last place I want to talk about is a cemetery called Oakwood Cemetery, and it's also called Hell's Gate. This cemetery is known as the most haunted place in South Carolina. It is said that you will have phone problems all during the day that you're there. Your phone battery will drain, you'll have a busy signal if someone calls you, and they say that if you go there at night, you'll see so many orbs everywhere. The cemetery is always misty after the sun goes down, and so many people have reported hearing the laughter of children. Now, there's also a warning on this website saying to never go there alone, and not because of ghosts, but because a lot of sketchy people go there to vandalize and to cause trouble, so you never want to be there without someone else with you. Anyway. Alright guys, guys, so let's get into some urban legends and haunted places in Georgia. The first place is Nickajack Creek Bridge. This covered bridge is located in Smyrna and is supposedly surrounded by what people call the waterheads. So the waterheads are basically children that have drowned in this creek underneath the bridge. And the legend goes that if you park on the bridge and turn off your car and put a Snickers bar on top of your car, the kids will scramble on the car to take the Snickers bar. So literally you go out by this bridge, you take your Snickers bar, put it on the roof of your car, and that will literally attract all of these children ghosts because I guess they just want candy and chocolate. And so that's like a tradition for people to do there. But during my research, I found that a lot of people actually take chocolate bars with them to old bridges to attract any ghosts that have drowned there. And it's such a bizarre thing that a ghost would be like attracted to chocolate, but apparently people have been doing this for a very long time. And I know there's a lot of old scary bridges near my house, and now I kind of want to go do this, but I feel like it would just look so weird. Like anybody who was walking past me as I held up this chocolate bar like, hey ghosts, come and get it, they would think I was just like so strange. They might call the cops. But yeah, chocolate bars and ghosts, apparently they just go together like pie. All right, next we have the Fort Mountain haunting. A young man visited Fort Mountain in Georgia and asked his friend to take a picture of him. Now, legend has it that the friend took the picture, but as soon as he looked at it, he screamed and fainted and then died. Imagine your friend taking a picture of you and then looking at what it is and like passing out. My first thought would be that I looked like super ugly in it or something. But basically what the picture showed was this guy standing there looking normal, just smiling, but behind him was this ghostly figure of a woman who was just staring at the camera. Now, I wasn't able to find the actual photo of this anywhere on the internet, so I don't know if this is just a legend that was made up or if they literally had to like remove this photo from the internet so no one else would be like affected by it. So if anyone knows where to find this actual picture, please let me know, but it's such a creepy thought. I would never want to take a picture of my friend and see like a ghost standing next to them. All right, next we have the Gracie Watson statue. I have briefly mentioned this on my channel before, but I just want to bring it up again because it is a very haunted spot in Georgia. The legend of Gracie Watson was a little girl that died of pneumonia at the age of 6 and now haunts the statue that was made in her honor. People often go here and feel some very strange vibes coming from this statue, and they often leave little cute trinkets by her feet, kind of just like gifts to honor her. And some say that if people move the trinkets, they can hear the girl cry, and that sometimes the statue even cries blood. So if anyone goes there and tries to steal any of the gifts from under her feet, she will literally cry. The statue will cry. And then we have the statue of Mary Maynard. Mary Maynard and her family are said to have lived in a large house near the Marietta National Cemetery in the 1800s. One tragic day, Mary heard her children crying on the upstairs floor. When she got up there, she realized that the house was on fire, and by the time she grabbed her 2 kids, it was too late. She could not get out of the house. So tragically, the 3 of them passed away, and they made this statue in their honor. Legend has it that this statue actually weeps for her infant twins, and the tears are so real that they roll down her face and dampen the bodice of her gown. So this is also a very tragic story, and there's so many statues around the world that are said to be haunted because the people died so tragically. All right, next we have the Fannin County Fairy Crosses. Those in search of a natural good luck charm can make their way to Blue Ridge, where outdoor enthusiasts often stumble across what's called fairy crosses. Now, these fairy crosses are stones that form what look to be perfect crosses, and these are completely real, and their scientific name is storolites. People say they are said to bring health, protection, and fortune, and fairy crosses are found in very few locations around the globe, and Fannin County is one of the very popular places that these can be found. So people go and take one and like keep it in their pocket all the time or keep it in their purse all the time. It's said to just bring very good good luck. In some legends, people say that the stones are created from fairy or angel tears. I feel like these rocks would be so cool to find and keep. Alright, so next we have the legend of Bigfoot. I know you guys all know what Bigfoot is. Basically, every state in the nation has a Bigfoot legend, and Georgia is no exception. Bigfoot is said to be a hairy, upright walking, ape-like creature that dwells in the wilderness and leaves footprints behind. He's always just been this mysterious, huge creature that wanders forests. And in 1997, a giant footprint was found along Elkins Creek in Pike County. The cast taken of the footprint is one of the most popular footprints ever found of Bigfoot. And people think this actually shows that Bigfoot does really exist, because no other animal could possibly make this footprint. And Georgia has a museum dedicated entirely to one of the most famous legendary beasts in North America. And I think this is one of the biggest Bigfoot museums in the entire world, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, next we have the Kennesaw House. Built in the 1840s, this building was used as a hospital during the Civil War and is believed to be home to nearly 700 spirits. This is absolutely crazy to me. The fact that a building could house 700 spirits. Oh my goodness. Now, there's a very scary report about these guests going to visit this building, and when they went into the elevator, it unexpectedly took them down to the basement. And that is not what this elevator is supposed to do. It's supposed to take guests upwards. So these people are standing in this elevator. It starts to go down. Imagine how scary that would be. And when they get to the basement, the doors of the elevator open, and all the people saw these ghostly soldiers lying in hospital beds. They even said they saw this ghostly surgeon walking around between all these people, and then quickly the doors of the elevator closed and went back to the main floor. And when these guests went to complain about what happened, the staff in the building said, no, it shouldn't go down to the basement. Another story told by a young schoolgirl who was on a field trip to the museum said she saw a woman in a light blue dress. The woman smiled at her and then disappeared. So this little girl went up to the staff of the museum and said, hey, I just saw this person in a blue dress. And so the staff asked the little girl to describe the face of this woman, what her hair was like, and they discovered that what this little girl saw was actually the original owner of the Kennesaw House. So I feel like that would be so scary to find out. And I mean, it's so common for little kids to see people that have passed away. I've done entire videos on that subject. So it's very common for little kids to go to historical buildings and actually see the original owners walking around. I know that one of my cousins, when they were little, they moved into a very old house, and immediately my younger cousin started to see these creepy people walking around. It's pretty scary, that's for sure. Anyway. So it is on Delaware, and I have found some extremely disturbing and creepy things that reside there. Are you even ready for this? Before I get started though, just want to remind you, I do have a new background behind me, if you have not seen yet. It is sparkly mermaid scales, which I love. And if you would like to win it, all you have to do is be subscribed to this channel, so my Jessii Vee channel, turn on your notification bell, and then head over to my Instagram page, follow me there, and DM me the color mermaid scale you would have if you were a mermaid. I feel like mine would be like this maybe. Alright guys, let's get into the urban legends and haunted places in Delaware. The first place is called Fort Delaware. Fort Delaware is located on Pea Patch Island, and its construction was completed in 1859, so it's been there for quite some time. It once was home to 13,000 prisoners. And as you guys know, with history usually comes some paranormal activity. Many people have witnessed ghost activity in the tunnels. It has such a reputation for being haunted that the TV show Ghost Hunters actually did an episode there. Their thermal camera picked up lots of activity in the tunnels and loud noises that sounded like cannon fire. Guests have reported feeling hands on their shoulders, losing necklaces, and hearing those same loud cannon booms. I don't know about you guys, but anything to do with tunnels really freaks me out. First, because I'm claustrophobic, and second, because I feel like trapped with the spirits in there. Wouldn't want to do that. Alright, let's move on to the Addy Sea Bed and Breakfast. The Addy Sea Bed and Breakfast was built in 1902. It has 13 rooms, and it is reported that at least 3 of them are haunted. There have been accounts of paranormal activity in rooms 1, 6, and 11. Room 1 is said to have a haunted bathroom. The tub is said to violently shake sporadically, and many guests have experienced it. Could you imagine sitting having a relaxing bath and suddenly it's just like, I dropped my phone again. Organ music can be heard coming from room 6, even though there's no organ there. And room 11 is haunted by a man who used to work for the Addy Sea. And his apparition is usually seen sitting on the actual bed or standing in the corner of the room. And apparently, even if you don't book one of these 3 haunted rooms, you'll still hear some really strange things because apparently there's a ghost on the roof. So all through the night, you can hear footsteps like walking around on the top of the roof. Apparently, because the original owner of this inn, their son actually tragically fell off the roof, so his spirit like lingers there. So a lot happens at this place. Oh, and one other really weird thing that happens to guests that stay there is that they frequently get locked in their closets. What? Like they have to call for help because someone locked them in the closets. All right, let's move on to the legend of Old Maggie's Bridge. This story really freaks me out, and it's actually a very tragic and sad story as well. One night, almost 200 years ago, a pregnant woman named Maggie Bloxam was traveling back to her home. Her horse spooked, and her carriage was flipped into a shallow creek, and since, she has haunted the bridge. It was a serious moment. Why did I sneeze? So when people hear this tragic story, they usually say, oh, it's just folklore, it's not actually real, that never actually happened. But Maggie Bloxam is actually buried in a cemetery nearby. Her actual gravestone is there in real life, but they're saying that her spirit lingers on this bridge. Those looking to reach out to Maggie park near the bridge and walk towards the creek, where they'll yell, Maggie, I have your baby. So they will literally taunt this poor ghost, saying they have their child, and there'll be reports of this woman screaming or wailing coming from the nearby woods. The local legend has many different versions of what happens when you call out to Maggie from this bridge, but most say that the call must be made at midnight or during the witching hour, which is 3 a.m. So here is a different version of calling Maggie's name 3 times. If you call Maggie, 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 it says you'll hear the hooves of the horse that she was on coming down the road. And if you call it again, Maggie, 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 you might see a shadow coming out of the woods near the bridge. And if you call her a 3rd time, Maggie, 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 she will emerge from the woods with her head in her hands, wanting you to bring her back to life and give her her child. So it's super creepy, and I've always found it so sad when people actually go and try to taunt spirits. I feel like that just should never be a thing. People also say that Maggie can be best seen on the night of a blue moon. Other people have reported their car acting strange when they drive over this bridge. Some people's engines will literally just turn off and they'll be stuck on the bridge. All right, let's move on to Catman's grave. The Catman is a gravekeeper who chases troublemakers away from Long Cemetery in Frankfurt. The legend is that when this gravekeeper died, he took on cat-like features, which is strange and I don't really understand how that works, but it's like he died and turned into this creepy Catman, and he basically scares kids away from partying in the cemetery. But be careful, because if you knock on his above-ground tomb and disturb his rest, he'll tinker with your car so that it won't start when you go to leave. So if you mess around in the cemetery or go and knock on his grave, he will not let you leave. Which is pretty scary. All right, let's move on to Woodburn Mansion. Woodburn Mansion was built in 1790. It's a 7-bedroom house that has been home to many of Delaware's wealthy citizens. But throughout all the years and all the residents of the governor's house, the ghosts of Woodburn Mansion have never left. And many people actually consider this place to be the most haunted house in Delaware. The first ghost that was ever seen here was reported in 1820. That's a long time ago. Basically, the homeowners had a guest guest over one night, and that guest was walking up the stairs to go to bed, and they saw this strange person standing in one of the bedrooms, wasn't moving. And the next day when they told the owners of the house, the owners were like, no, you were the only guest here. There's no one else here. So clearly that guest had seen a ghost in the house. They say the dining room is particularly haunted by what people call the wine ghosts. The owner reported that he'd fill his wine decanter every night and find it empty the next morning. So these ghosts are apparently wine drinkers and literally steal all the wine from the dining room. So random. And a young girl is seen often in the garden wearing a red checkered gingham dress. She loves to splash and play in the pools and fountains, and she is seen floating shyly around the house, sometimes tugging on people's clothes. So every part of the house is haunted. Like if you're outside, if you're in the dining room, if you're upstairs, it's all very haunted. And the last place we're going to be talking about is Lum's Pond State Park. People say that these woods are hiding a very dark secret. In the 1870s, one young girl from Newcastle County ran away from an unhappy home and found a spot to stay beneath the forest canopy. Unfortunately for her, she was not the only one in the woods that summer. She was attacked and unfortunately passed away there. So they say that her spirit haunts this park, and if you're ever taking a hike, you should stop and listen, and apparently you'll hear her speak to you. Time and time again, solo hikers hear shrill screams or cries for help coming from the woods. So this is also a very tragic story, and they say that you'll usually hear her or see her if you're hiking alone. So that's definitely really spooky, but those are... Today we're going to be talking about Maine. I'm not really going in order of states anymore. I'm kind of just choosing at random so everyone gets a fair chance. Once I'm done talking about the states, I will be moving to other countries around the world. But today is Maine, and the first location we're going to be discussing is the Sabotus Well. And this story is actually incredibly eerie. According to the story, a group of teens dared a friend to be lowered into a well in Sabotus. The well, which was located at the back of a cemetery, was reported to be extremely haunted. But this boy agreed to the challenge in order to impress all the boys in his friend group. So he sat on top of a rubber tire and was literally lowered down slowly into the well. Now he was in the well for many minutes before his friends could no longer see him. And when they realized that there was no longer any movement at the bottom of the rope, the boys pulled him up and saw that he was very changed. The boy's hair had turned bright white, his entire body was shaking, and he wasn't able to form any coherent sentences. All the words he was speaking weren't making any sense. Apparently, he was laughing profusely, and his friends thought that he actually went insane. His appearance was that of like an old man, which obviously shocked his whole friend group. He went in there as a little boy and left as something different. The boy never came back from this state and is said to randomly scream from the windows of the county mental institution where he now lives. So after he did this challenge, he literally went insane and never came back from it. So don't go near this well. Next, we have a story about the Segin Island lighthouse. In the mid-1800s, the lighthouse was inhabited by a caretaker and his wife. To combat the lonely isolation of the island, the caretaker had a piano shipped to keep his wife occupied. Now, the caretaker did not realize that his wife didn't really know how to play the piano that well. She only knew one song. So every single day, all day long, she would play the one piano song over and over and over. And eventually the caretaker could take no more and went insane and destroyed her piano with an axe. And then after that, he went after his wife. So today, local folks have claimed to have heard the lonely song coming from the lighthouse, and it plays over and over and over. So if you ever get a piano, make sure to learn more than one song. I used to take piano lessons back in the day, but there was this one song from Twilight that I would just play incessantly, and I would drive my parents crazy. Alright, the next story is the Ghost Bride of Haynesville Woods. On a wooded road in the outskirts of Haynesville, a newlywed couple traveled on a dark winter night. Now, the story goes that the groom was apparently drunk. He ran right into a telephone pole, which instantly killed him. Now, the young young bride was able to crawl from the wreckage and made her way back to the snowy road. And she waited for hours and hours for somebody to just drive by and help her. However, the conditions of the road were so bad, which meant no one was really out driving that night. And unfortunately, the woman never received any help. It is reported that she remained in the same place in her wedding gown where she eventually froze to death. And now travelers on the road have reported seeing the woman in the white gown outside of Haynesville Woods. She is still reportedly seen wandering on the side of the road back and forth, searching for help that never came. Some even claim to have actually spoken to the woman. And in these instances, she tells the driver of her situation, but as the vehicle gets closer and closer to her, she eventually disappears. So basically, her spirit haunts this area. Next, we have the Maiden's Cliff haunting. In this tale, a young woman falls to her death on the rocks of Maiden Cliff. This was during a very windy day, and her hat blew off her head and sailed through the air. And in an attempt to retrieve it, the young girl was killed. People aren't really sure if she died right at the site where she fell, or if someone saw her, took her home, tried to help her, and she died there. But her spirit still haunts the area, which is now marked by a white cross. So yeah, there's actually a lot of tragic stories in Maine. Wow. Then we have a story called Hannah Under the Floorboards. Newfield's old straw house was owned by Gideon Straw and is said to be haunted by his daughter Hannah. According to this legend, she's actually buried under the kitchen. She died in March of 1826, and she was apparently 30 years old at the time. The ground was still frozen from the winter chill, so her father buried her underneath the kitchen floorboard in the ground that was warm from the heat of the house. So it is kind of sad because obviously he wanted to bury her outside, but the ground was just too frozen. Folks who have inhabited the house over the years say they've encountered Hannah's apparition, and apparently in the 1960s specifically, people would always see her face in the window of the house. They've also reported footsteps in the hall and lights turning on and off when no one was home. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I probably wouldn't want to live in a house where I knew a body was buried under the kitchen floor. Oh my gosh. Next, we have a story of the tall man in the tavern. Many people have talked about eerie happenings inside the Jameson Tavern in a building that dates back to the late 18th century. They say a tall man in a top hat stands in a spot between the bar and the restaurant. There have also been sightings of child ghosts in this area, but the restaurant owners do say they are fairly friendly. They don't really hear about anything happening with these children's spirits, but there is one report from someone who was eating at the restaurant late one night, and on their walk back home, they saw an abnormally tall shadowed man following them down the sidewalk. And when they reached their house, the figure stood at the bottom of their driveway and watched them walk inside. I don't know about you guys, but if I saw an extremely tall man following me home, especially one that literally looks like Slender Man, I would call the police. That would be absolutely terrifying. Next, we have a story called Please Stay Put, Mary. Mary Nason is buried in a beautiful old cemetery with gorgeous ornate headstones marking her final resting spot. She apparently died in 1774, and there have been rumors for decades and decades talking about her being a witch. So her grave is said to be haunted, and a long stone that covers the length of her body was placed there to keep her from rising in the night. But the people in this area who manage her grave say that these rumors were never true. She was just accused of falsely being a witch, which is kind of sad, especially because people thought she was literally going to like raise from the grave. My goodness. Anyway. So let's get into the haunted places in New Jersey. The first place is the Devil's Tree. I really don't like that name at all, but it is very significant to New Jersey because of how haunted it is. The Devil's Tree is located in Bernards Township, and legend says that the tree is cursed and harm will come to anybody who disrespects it. Now, allegedly, snow doesn't even fall around this tree. The snow will fall and melt instantly around touching it. So in the winter, there's literally a circle of just grass and the snow is everywhere nowhere else but near this tree. Apparently this tree will actually throw people from it, and there's this one story I found of a man talking about this time that he climbed it and something very bad happened to him. He said, "As we sat on the branch, we began to hear noises coming from inside the tree. When these noises grew even louder, a big bang sounded and a burst of energy came from the tree, sending myself and my friends flying into the air." Apparently when he crashed back onto the ground, he broke his ankle really badly. There's also this other story about a teenager who doubted that this tree was haunted at all. Do you hear him? He's chewing on his toy. In order to prove that he wasn't scared, he stopped his car while driving past it with his friends in the car and walked up to the tree and urinated on it. The tree apparently took revenge immediately. His car became absolutely uncontrollable. It accelerated on its own and made him crash into another tree down the road. Now, nobody was seriously injured, but the tree obviously demonstrated that you should not be messing with it. According to someone who visited the tree, they were haunted by the voices screaming from within the bark. Usually trees are inhabited by squirrels, birds, and other woodland creatures, but the devil's tree seems to have a much more sinister force lurking among its mangled branches. So when people visit this tree, odd things always happen, and apparently you shouldn't even get too close or touch the bark of the tree. People say that if they do touch the bark, they get this strange oil-like substance onto their hands, and when they go home and try and clean it, apparently it's really difficult to wash off. There is a legend of people who have taken hunks of bark off of the tree, and according to some, a specter has appeared near their bed at night in the form of an old man. So like if you steal a branch from this tree, a leaf from this tree, if you bring anything home from this tree, a creepy figure of this old man will appear in your room while you're trying to sleep. Does not sound too fun. I'm sorry, I love playing with my braids. Alright, so next we have the Woodbridge Cemetery snake. This legend dates back to 1896, beginning with the funeral of a woman named Lulu Lorch. A snake is said to have wrapped itself around her casket, and anyone who looked the snake in the eye would meet their certain demise. And while this seems like super unlikely and just an old legend, apparently Lulu's 29-year-old brother looked at the snake and died of heart failure only 20 minutes later. That's terrifying. So apparently if you go to this cemetery, do not look at any snakes that might pass you by, especially not in the eyes. Then we have Belmar's disappearing pond. According to Native American legend, a large pond once sat at the junction of 18th Avenue and Allaire Road. On a cold night, a massive flock of geese landed in the pond. The pond ended up freezing and these geese were trapped, but they worked together and flew off, apparently lifting the entire pond with them as they flew away. So obviously this is just like a fable about teamwork, but yeah, it's a very interesting legend in this area. Once again, I'm so sorry that my dog is chewing a toy right by the microphone. Alright, then we have the Toms River Terror. A haunting in the city made headlines several years ago when a family purchased a home in the neighborhood but fled after only a week, claiming there had been strange noises and occurrences. Allegedly, doors would open and shut, whispers could be heard through the vents, and eerie dragging and scraping sounds came from the basement. And apparently they had this paranormal team go to their house and they were able to capture this very creepy voice, which is terrifying. And lastly, we have Shades of Death Road. No one is quite sure how Shades of Death Road got its morbid name, but most stories agree that the area was once known just as the Shades, and that apparently after a series of fatal occurrences, they changed the name, but apparently the scary stories really differ from person to person. Some say that a number of murders took place along the road beneath the overhanging trees, from which the area got its original name. According to another account, the area was once a swampy area with countless mosquitoes, which led to a number of deaths due to malaria. And near this road, there's actually a small body of water called Ghost Lake, which is a man-made body of water that was given its name thanks to spectral pillars of vapor that are said to rise from its surface. And also near this road, there's a place called the Fairy Hole that is rumored to be related to Native American burial grounds and witchcraft. So yeah, this road just has a lot of bad history around it. So yeah, I wouldn't drive down there. Anyway. Alright, let's get right into this video about the creepy places in Oregon. First, we have what's called Haetta Head House's Gray Lady. That's almost a tongue twister. The biggest hawk just swooped down and picked an animal up on our... Is that a bald eagle? That might be a bald eagle. That's the biggest bird I've ever seen in my life. It just swooped down and took something out of our lawn. I'm just gonna make sure my dogs are inside. All right, that was insane. That was so... Anyway, sorry guys, sorry. All right, let's talk about this lighthouse. The lighthouse was constructed in 1894, and it is believed that at some point, a woman lost her daughter at that location, possibly falling from the cliffs. Some people even say that the child's grave is somewhere around this lighthouse. Now, the woman was known as Rue, and she was very heartbroken by the loss of her child, obviously, and people think that she eventually succumbed to her grief and passed away. But to this day, Rue has never really left the premise. Since 1950, there have been many accounts of lighthouse keepers telling tales of screams and wailing heard in the night. Things are constantly moved around the lighthouse keeper's room. Things constantly go missing or appear out of nowhere. Things are just very, very strange in this lighthouse. Rue has even shown herself on occasion. It's very rare to actually see her, but she's described as having long silver hair. She's wearing a gray dress, and that's why she is sometimes referred to as the Gray Lady. A man was once cleaning one of the windows in the attic, and he glanced in the window and saw a reflection of the Gray Lady. And when he turned, he saw her floating over top of the attic floor. He was so terrified that he tried to get out as soon as possible. He ended up breaking the window and vowed to never go there ever again. Next, we have the Witches of Malheur Butte. I probably said that so wrong. According to locals, this 2,661-foot inactive volcano plays host to evil spirits, which was once even a meeting point for witches. Back in the day, Native Americans used the butte as a lookout point to watch for settlers coming in covered wagons. It is believed that many people lost their lives on this trail, and their spirits just linger on, like haunting this area forever. Legend has it that Malheur Butte was also once a place where witches gathered to practice dark magic. Covens met here regularly to perform bone-chilling rituals and ceremonies. An even weirder thing is that locals say they often see these apparitions appear as dogs in this area, like creepy ghost dogs will chase people around. Apparently even the name Malheur, which I'm probably not saying right, it actually means tragedy, misfortune, or unhappy place in French. So you know something's not right there. Next, we have the McMinnville UFO sightings. In 1950, a woman named Evelyn Trent started yelling for her husband at about 7:45 in the evening. She was feeding their rabbits in the yard of their farm when she saw it. This is a quote from her. She said, "It was like a good-sized parachute canopy without the strings, only silver bright mixed with bronze. It was as pretty as anything I had ever saw." She ran into the house, found her husband and their camera, and they raced back into the yard. That's when they saw this wingless object floating in the sky, and the 43-year-old farmer managed to take 2 photographs before the flying object disappeared into the evening mist. Now, these photographs were published in several magazines. It was even in Life magazine, and people say this is the best evidence of UFOs ever captured. They can't debunk these photos. It's so creepy. Next, we have Portland's Shanghai tunnels. Under the city of Portland, there's a series of tunnels connecting hotels and bars to the waterfront. They were built to move supplies from boats to their basement storage unit. The tunnels were also used for illegal activities from 1850 to 1941, which resulted in the death of many people. So people say that when you go down there, you can still hear the talking and moaning and groaning and screaming from all the people who died there. So that's great. Deep within the tunnels, travelers report feeling goosebumps as if someone is watching them from the shadows. There's this story of this one man who even heard the sound of like a child whistling, and as soon as he heard that sound, he was thrown to the ground by an unknown force. When he lifted his flashlight up, he saw that nobody was behind him, and this man told everybody that he would never go there again because something in there is super violent, and obviously you do not want to be around that. Next, we have the legend of the Bandage Man. Now, this is an urban legend that has been around since the 1960s, and it may have started as a way to deter young lovers from parking in overlooks along Highway 101. The story goes that a young couple was parked in a truck somewhere near Cannon Beach. They were completely oblivious to their surroundings. They were just in the truck kissing and carrying on, and that's when the truck suddenly shifted as if someone just climbed onto the roof of their car. They looked out their rear window to find a disfigured man covered in bandages rocking the truck back and forth. This creepy man started pounding on all of the windows, so the boy had to quickly back the truck out of this this overlook to get back on the highway. But apparently the couple drove for a few miles with the bandaged man still beating on the truck until he suddenly disappeared. So over the years, people complain about this man jumping onto their cars out of nowhere around this area. Sweethearts in parking lots or overlooks report seeing the bandaged man approach their car. Others say that they've seen him on the beach and walking down the side of Highway 101. Some people believe that bandaged man is the ghost of a logger who died after horrific injuries sustained while working nearby. People say he smells terrible, like of rotting flesh, and sometimes after he's attacked your car, he'll leave bloody bandages behind, so that's great. And then lastly, we have the Jantzen Beach Carousel. From the 1920s until the 70s, Jantzen Beach Amusement Park on Haetta Island was a widely popular tourist attraction. But there was just too many issues going on with this amusement park. There were so many fires that broke out, so many injuries and deaths that occurred here. So that's what led to the park's demise and ultimately why they closed it down. The space was then used for a mall, which actually features the park's original carousel. But back in 2012, when the mall had to go under renovations, they had to put this old carousel into storage. Now this was a massive, heavy, giant carousel. And so the strangest thing happened back in 2015. When city officials went to retrieve the old carousel to put it back in the mall, it was gone from storage. So this is like a literal mystery because it'd be so hard for someone to just take the carousel because it's so giant. You would need like 8 trucks attached to each other to even move it. So people don't know where it went, and it's creepy because this storage place was looked after by security. So suddenly it was gone, and ever since it disappeared, strange things have been happening, like paranormal events in this area, all to do with this creepy carousel. So I don't even like carousels. I get dizzy and I want to throw up.